Not all superheroes wear capes. Some wear wellies. Wellies.
Happy to go?
Good to go.
Good evening, everybody, and you are very welcome. We have a fantastic guest here with us this evening, all the way from Galway, Mr. David O'Reilly. And I know David from driving a Celtic chariot around my bottom field with people on looking from all directions, and it's a fantastic sight to see a Galway man 10 foot up in the air throwing spears. So, David, you're very welcome to Sligo.
Well, I feel welcome for the umpteenth time here, James.
Yeah.
You know, you've one of the things is you have created the environment where all this can take place. And, you know, my experience of things is it's difficult. You know, not everybody wants to take the risk of one, driving around with two ponies and a chariot, and two, hosting the event, you know.
Yeah.
And you've done that. And it takes courage, you know, to open up your home and your fields and your land. And, you know, we do these things, and we benefit from doing them.
Well, it was one of the things when we moved out here, we'll say permanently. I had been working and coming back and doing a little bit with the place. And then when we came here permanently, I started doing odd things. So we were building the house, and then I was out in the patio making an open fireplace and a forge and a toilet and a shower. And my better half was probably wondering what all of this was in aid of. But when the pandemic struck, we seen what it was in aid of. Like, we were able to have our events where people who were being given out to for not wearing a mask, we were all able to congregate here and have a fantastic time and learn about Celtic mythology and Celtic life from yourself, and then beekeeping and poaching making and all these wonderful aspects of Irish culture that, you know, at the time you weren't allowed to go to the pub, you weren't allowed to go to the community hall, and we had a full-blown festival here. And you can sue me if you want. We really enjoyed it, so we did.
We did. But what was curious to me is all roads were converging.
There were.
The noose was tightening around everything.
Yes.
And we were coming to the place where we had to do it on our own. And that was the same for the chariot.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I built the chariot, I demonstrated I demonstrated my theories about the chariot to the National Museum, and I got some kind of an approval from them. They brought me down to the vaults, you know, and I got to handle all these beautiful chariot pieces from, you know, all of them, from you can only imagine the stories behind them.
Well, I'm going to say that to the audience because there might be some people unfamiliar with what we're on about. Yeah. David has a real-to-life replica of what the High Kings, the Brian Boru types, all of those fellas would have been riding round in. And it's extraordinary because it's so advanced for its time. Yeah. So I'd be familiar with carts and traps and sulkies and all types of horse vehicles. Yes. This is totally different. It's so far advanced. So if you can tell us a little bit more.
I'll tell you what it was. And I'll come back to that whole thing about what happened to the project, you know, because it was coming here anyway. And I'll explain that later. So what I did was there are 6 or 7 chariots carved on the High Crosses of Ireland. And these are from about the 9th or 10th century. But what they represent is the chariot as a representation of the status and heroic self-image of the Gael, going back to Cuchulainn. And really chariot culture going way back was kind of Aryan culture. You know, they were the people around southern Ossetia or someplace like that, invented these chariots and started just drifting around the world in them and impressing everybody with their almost with their technology and almost godlike qualities. You know, that they provided leadership and imagination and a vision of potential and power and dream to people all over the world, and with their chariots. And so the Irish, of course, or the Gaelic people or the Celtic people had chariots for a long time. We have chariot roads from, I think, 1500 BC. That's the belief from what we see. And so this was a part of our identity, if you like. It was. So when you see the Ahenny High Cross, which is the one I copied, the Clonmacnoise High Cross is also got some wonderful related chariots on it, 2 of them. But I picked the Ahenny High Cross chariot to reproduce. And we know the name of the person who was on that chariot from the records. And this is unusual for the early or medieval period. It's Cormac MacQuillenan. He was the Bishop of Cashel and the King of Munster at the same time. He went to war, and the other 2 chariots are related through the Battle of Ballamugna, which was fought in 907 AD or 904 according to other texts. And it was against Flansinna and Maelshocknall of Leinster and Ulster. And they're the 2 characters on the Clonmacnoise High Cross in their chariots too. So even though the chariot as a war machine seems to have died out around 600 or 700, we don't hear of chariots as war machines, but they are still on the battlefield in that they elevate you and you represent yourself in power and authority because your head is higher than all the cavalry, higher than you're right up there. Everybody can see you because you're up aboard your chariot.
Well, that's when I seen you on your chariot, I was trying to put myself into what it looked like as an infantryman at that stage. And your head is 10 foot in the air. You know, it's a very imposing piece of machinery. I can only imagine what it was like trying to hold a line with this approaching you at a full gallop.
Yeah.
Frightening prospect.
It is. It's overwhelming. I'm not sure I've been able to represent the chariot to people in the way I would like to have represented it.
Yes.
As I say, my chariot is like the Ford Fiesta of chariots compared to the potential.
Yes.
I suppose I'm jumping around a lot, but I have a bit of a disappointment in a way, because the chariot to the Gael is what the longship is to the Norse.
Yes.
And my disappointment was the heritage and academia didn't engage proactively to bring this thing forward. So I spent probably about 20 grand on putting 2 chariots together. I was road contracting at the time. I had money and this was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was delighted because I got on the telly, I got recognition. I was on with John Creedon. I was on with Neil Delamere a couple of times. I was on a lot of, pre-Christian stuff, so I was delighted with all that. The media picked up on it, but no, the state, that the funding or that what it deserved, it never got. I could only give it so much. And the thing is, after all doing that, James, I was like getting, it was good. It was about 500 to 1,000 to show up with the ponies.
Yes.
And the 2, and I was getting, but when I looked at what it needed, because some of these chariots were worth, according to the texts, 20 female slaves. So, that is a huge extra investment of gold and bronze and glass just to make it more shiny and also to make it more like it would have been as a battlefield instrument. So it would have had panels coming up. So in some of the texts it says Cuchulainn turned his board towards such a one. And that basically means you put your board onto the chariot, and if you put it on I can't remember, was it the left or right hand side, but one side means you're going to war, because you're going to start firing darts over this.
Yeah.
You've got your little shield, you've got your panel. You're essentially building a tower, a mobile platform, defended mobile platform.
Yes.
And you're going to go start charging around in it.
Well, can I ask you this? Do you think the lack of interest and, we'll say, funding from the academia and the state, I would have my suspicion what you were presenting was a heroic image of what was, when in reality what they want to present is a kind of a bet down people, and how could you look back to your heritage and think you could do anything remarkable now? There's nothing remarkable to look at. When I seen you going round there at the bottom, I thought, my God, what a people we were.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was a society that was bet down or anything like that.
No.
And John Waters, I was speaking to him at one time, he made an excellent point. It was, I think, an Algerian who was speaking about colonialism. And he said, when you can convince the people that only savagery existed before the arrival of the colonizer, you have defeated the people. What you were doing was presenting a heroic image of what we were.
You've nailed it. They were actually offended by the chariot, a lot of people. Academia had its own understanding of it. Now, look, there's people in the media, people in academia, and people in the reenacting community who really, really encouraged me. You know, there were people who recognised and loved it. But essentially, when you present a heroic national self-image to a society that is reinventing itself as secular, multicultural, and globalist, it's not like, I mean, you look at Galway Arts Festival, you know, I mean, years ago, all you saw was, you know, a French crowd arrive to do something spectacular for, you know, 50, 100 grand, you know.
Yes, yeah.
They wanted to be cosmopolitan, you know. You wanted to be not this. We have cultural cringe, you know, at institutional level. They go, I don't know if I want to go there. You know, I might have all my defeats played back to me. You know, there is a general belief that all knowledge, civilization comes from the East, you know, that it travels across the country to Ireland. And, you know, how does this fit in? What you've got is a highly advanced and technologically brilliant piece of horse equipment. So, for one, a lot of the academics weren't even willing to admit or stand by the idea that Irish even had chariots, despite the fact that there's all these artifacts in the National Museum, that there's all these texts relating to them, there's all this imagery carved on the high crosses. And I think it's Cunliffe says, well, we can't actually say there was ever chariots in Ireland, you know?
Well, let me put this point to you then, because I think it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Is there an aspect of this modern academia that doesn't want to touch on the subject that there was a fairly advanced society who underwent people coming from different places, and all of a sudden the civilization a couple 100 years later were actually less advanced than what had happened before?
this happens over and over again with horse equipment. For example, with the Normans are supposed to have these amazing, knights with these saddles with stirrups, and this is how they won the battle in Dublin against the O'Connors and the rest of it with this heavy cavalry. But you look at the Norman descendants, the Burkes in Galway, they're riding on Irish saddles. They're not. They've got rid of their knight saddles, and they're riding cattle riding saddles like everybody else.
Yeah.
And the thing with the chariot is, it's the thing which shocked them. Well, one, a lot of people didn't know. If you're an academic, you sitting at a screen are not going to be able to understand the shape, the horse equipment, the style, the kind of harness that might be used, because you've never done it before. And you look at a pile of harness on the ground, it's just like spaghetti. It's just all over the place. What's that way? It's only when you've put it on a horse and, made it all work, driven it down the road. Essentially, you tie stuff onto horses and see what happens, you know? So unless you've done that, you don't really know what you're looking at for a start.
Yes.
So when you see an image on the high crosses of a chariot, they look at stuff and say, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It must be fantasy. You know, they don't think, I'm going to believe these guys because they are our own people trying to communicate something to us from, through time about themselves. I'm going to believe them.
Yeah.
Look, the easiest thing for people, for any academic or any intellectual to say is, it never happened, know, because how do you prove it never, it did, the onus is all to say it did happen.
Yeah.
It's easy peasy, just say, I don't know, but to say, actually, there's something amazing here. Let's have a look at it. Let's try it. So I with that big high shaft, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I'll say it. I'll describe it. So what it reminds me a little bit of is an articulated truck.
Yeah.
And if you look at traditional Irish ass or horse cart, you have the two shafts coming up the side of the animal, which basically means that the animal and the cart has to move like a rigid truck, which is jig across like this. Whereas the chariot that you have, there's a long arm comes up through the centre of the two horses and attaches to a yoke that's on both horses. So you basically have full 360-degree movement at any time.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
It's basically a gooseneck trailer.
It is. It's a dorsal hitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which you don't even see in mechanical terms until so much later. It's incredible.
It is. And look, you can see on the carving the outline of bow springs, you know. You can see all kinds of technical stuff there, which is on every modern vehicle. And this is like from 900 AD, from the 10th century, at a time when Europe doesn't even do monumental art. We're carving stuff onto monumental art, which is technically excellent.
Yeah.
And so what I had to do was go along and say to everybody, actually, you're all wrong. And I'm not an academic.
Yeah.
I'm just a horseman, But you're all wrong.
Yeah.
We keep on being in this position, don't we? We keep on being in this position where we're saying to scientists, to academics, you're all wrong.
Well, you see, the trouble that we're encountering at the moment is a fundamental lack of bravery by academia. Yeah. Because I always go back to it as when Einstein came on the scene, basically he said, you know what Newton told you, and I know that he invented calculus or whatever it was to describe all these things, but he's wrong. This is what gravity is. It's not what you thought it was. It's this. He's wrong about time, And there was a bit of chin wagging at the time and a bit of munching about it, but they did accept that, hold on a second, what this fella has to say is 99% true. So that's good enough for all of us. Whereas now, like, I never forget it during the pandemic, Luke O'Neill said, the science is settled. And I thought, fuck, that's the most unscientific thing that I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
If science is settled, it's no longer science.
No, it's like me having a monopoly on chariots, you know?
Yeah.
No one else is allowed to build a chariot because it might make mine look bad, or I might learn something, or I might, you know.
Yeah, but you see, the difference is, if someone landed to you tomorrow morning from Romania or Bulgaria or someplace and went, Mr. O'Reilly, that's a lovely thing that you've made, but you're jack shit wrong, and here's what it was.
Yeah.
You'd go, fantastic. Do you know?
Yeah, I'd say first, build me one. You know, like I did. You know? Yeah.
But you see, if they came and let's say they have their own full-blown replica, I guarantee you'd go, actually, yeah, this makes sense.
You've always got something to learn, especially with horses. You know, I remember doing some film work, and I did it right. I got up on the horse, and she says, are you any good on a horse? I said, well, I'll do my best. You know, she says, I know. She says, I know when I've got a bullshitter, because they tell me, you know, I can do that. You know, this. I'm doing it all my life and everything. And then next thing they're on their arts, you know.
Yeah.
And so look, you need to learn. You need to be. Everyone has to learn, and there's always something to learn. Look, what with the different feats that are in the town that were performed with chariots. There's so much more to do. I mean, this is the beauty of Irish heritage, is that so little of it has been reproduced. You can go into Viking culture or Roman culture, and you can buy the stuff on the internet. But in Irish culture, you got to go and make it yourself, like this helmet here. No one's ever made one of them before. But that's my interpretation of the De Burca cavalryman from the Book of De Burca. That's the kind of helmet that he was using. So,
and if you look at that, there's remarkable similarity between that and what the Spartans would have been wearing. But you see,
even this hook here, you know, all this face stuff. But
you see, this is what annoys me is, and I always remember it. When we were children in national school, we were brought to the National History Museum or that in Dublin.
Yeah.
And as a child, it was hard to see past the fact, because I was familiar with my mother and father's stories and my grandfather's stories and all that. And they began describing a society that to me seemed far more advanced. Yeah. In its rules, in its legislation, in its machinery, I think it's hard for people to forget, you know, even the concept of a cronnog, you know, an island, so you can be defended from the animals that were in Ireland at the time and all this. I don't know, why is there such let's not go there. Don't talk about that. And don't talk about the fact that, you know, the Romans, they went all across Europe. There's a reason they stopped at Scotland and Ireland. And it's not the reason that there was nothing there anyways. Oh, I'm very sorry. There was a lot going on in both of those societies. It's because the Scots and the Irish at the time were fairly advanced on the terrain that they were on. And you're a long way away from home for backup to be coming.
You're hitting all the right spots because, James, the best thing I ever did was I didn't read books by historians. I read the texts
themselves,
the texts that were written by the Irish scribes, you know, translated into English. Thank God for Cork University. There's a Celt website, celt.ie, something. And if you look it up on the internet, you've got a huge number of texts going right back to our earliest texts, St. Patrick, right up to Porrick Pierce and the rest of them. There's hundreds of texts translated into English. And you can just go up if you want to research chariots, if you want to research Brian Boru, if you want to research Hugh O'Neill, it's all there. And you just listen to the people who wrote about it, rather than listen to the historians who wrote about the man writing about it. And so, I mean, the stories we don't hear. I mean, for example, when did you ever hear of any of our heroes, our Gaelic heroes, having a movie? We've been 100 years a state now.
That's right.
And there hasn't been a movie about Niall of the Nine Hostages. There hasn't been a movie about St. Patrick. Hasn't been a movie about Cuchulainn. There hasn't been a movie about Hugh O'Neill. There hasn't been a movie about Brian Boru. None of the Gaelic heroes have been reproduced.
The Gaelic culture stands as a direct magnifying glass on modern society. You had a clan culture, nomadic in a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
Piracy was going on. It was a common thing.
Yeah.
No problem with it. We weren't the weeping willows people describe us as.
No.
And now you have a modern culture where you have homelessness, loneliness, all of this. And if you start talking about the Gael and you say to people, you know, actually, there was a time when Irish people not only owned their state, but they were stealing off other states. Yeah. They were a remarkable people.
And, I mean, Niall of the Nine Hostages is the big one for me, because if you follow the logic of the story, it means that after the Romans arrived here, that the Gael, the Ulstermen, had an alliance of people who effectively controlled, who were effectively top dogs in Ireland, Britain, and parts of Western France. So that the hostages were going right into France. The hostages were they were the Gauls and also the Franks. So if you had a hostage, it meant that you had leverage over those people, because you have they have, rather than fight you, they've said, look, let's talk, let's have an agreement, and you give hostages to the more powerful. So Niall of the Nine Hostages, the four kingdoms of Ireland, the Picts, the Saxons, the Britons, the Franks, and the Gauls, according to our version of history, all gave hostages to Niall of the Nine Hostages. And even in 535 AD, there's an entrance which says that Macerca won territory against the Franks in Gaul. So this is a British-based Irish king who's in France and has just established his kingdom. Now, I wonder, was that the kingdom of the Bretons? You know,
well, it would account for so much of the language similarities, and
But where's the academic research into this? You know, what have they been doing all this time?
Well, I spoke to a Welshman at a very interesting event near Kerwas. It was terrier racing. Now, it's stopped since, they won't allow it anymore, but basically they tied a foxtail to a long wire and terriers chased at it or that. But this man was a natural Welsh speaker. And after a few jars, he says to me, he says, one of the greatest things that will happen in the next couple of decades is, he says, your people will be revealed to have been some of the cruelest on the continent. And I went, what? And he says, I'm telling you. He says, ye like to give out about what the British done, but he says, when history reveals how cruel you were on the continent. And he was fully confident in that.
Well, you know, possibly because you've got these Ogham stones in the West Country in England and in Wales. You know, were they territorial markers from Irish lords? I don't know. It's all, you know, to prove this stuff is very hard.
Yes.
You've got to have the will to try and prove it in the first place, which isn't there.
No.
So you're not going to have the archaeological teams go over to investigate these possibilities. So it's possible that we were a very cruel people. there was a lot of cruelty back in the day.
Yes.
People piled up piles of heads, all kinds of things. But yet, by the middle, as we went through the medieval period, you see in Ireland some of the best and the most compassionate laws coming in, like the law of the innocents, which was in the 6th century, I believe, around 600, which was that, non-combatants were to be left alone in times of war. And I think that was the first in the world.
Mm-hmm. So it's a bit like the Geneva Convention of the day.
It was, and cattle raiding. If you think of cattle raiding,
well, there was a set of rules to that.
Yeah, exactly. And you go after the cattle, not the people. You're not going to kill the people. You're going to take the cattle. And that's enough to exercise your power over them and demonstrate your power over them, and also demonstrate your power over the people who are living on the borderlands between territories. So you're basically saying, I can come and take your lord is not protecting you in this situation. I can take your cattle. You better come give me your loyalty. Mm-hmm. And that's how Connacht gets territory off Munster, mm-hmm. or Munster gets territory off Connacht.
Yes.
By persuading people on the borderlands that, this is, if you want protection, you better come over to us, like.
Yeah.
And but it does look, we went through a transformation. I believe we probably did. The wonderful thing about our transformation, if you like, with Brehon law and all those kind of things, I know it's a sensitive subject for a lot of people. You're talking about the arrival of Christianity, and a lot of people see that as a painful thing, Well,
let me put this to you, because this would be a point that a lot of people that I know would, share.
Yeah.
And they would say that Ireland as a society was where the Romans went, no, we're not having that. And it was really only with the onset of St. Patrick and Christianity, the driving out of Druidry and paganism, and then the invasions really began. It wasn't the Normans were when we had converted.
Yeah.
The Vikings, is there an element of saying, I hate to say it because I'm a Christian myself.
Yeah.
But if it hadn't have happened, well,
look, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
So I do the pre-Christian religious beliefs are still my tradition.
Yeah.
According to St. Paul, if we didn't come to people like us, we're Gentile Christians. We're not Jewish Christians. We're Gentile Christians. So we come from a pagan tradition.
Yes.
And that meant we weren't under Jewish law.
Yes.
So because we are through our consciences, we had accepted the new revelation, then we didn't have to obey all this Judaic law. And we could keep a lot of our practices regarding full moons. And I think the only two things we weren't allowed to do was eat meat sacrificed to idols and participate in sexual practices around those rituals. That's it. That was all we were, according to the New Testament, that we were required to do. So very much our clan-based values just march straight through from one set of values to another. And it's my belief that Brehon law was the coming together of our tribal or our Tua, our clan set of values, set of laws with that had been Christianized, that had been brought into this, this new way of seeing the world. And so I think Schenkers Moore is as far as I understand, and I'm not an academic, Schenkers Moore is the basis of Breton law. It was, came in around, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th century, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, would it not be a fair point that Christianity is a great religion for peace, but a bloody terrible one for war?
Tell me.
Well, I think Christianity fundamentally changed how the Gaelic society was, because it wasn't. It really put an end to nomadism. It was all of a sudden fixed farming positions, fixed monastery positions. You take the intelligentsia, who would at one point have been really pushed forward into being the war leaders. The most intelligent would have been the chiefs, and all of a sudden you have them sitting in a monastery writing books and being philosophers and all the rest of it. As I says, I'm a Christian. I do believe in Jesus or that.
Yeah, so do I.
But I can't help but think that it fundamentally changed Gaelic society.
I would say, it's my hope, and it's a hope which has been strengthened in me, that, see, what St. Patrick did was unique. Rather than bring the structure of the imperial civic structure of civilization and church to Ireland, he just used the existing tribal structure and made that work for Christianity. And that's why we had a very different kind of Christian. So the local chieftain appointed the bishop, not the pope. So that was what was different about us.
And there's so many other things as well. Like when you look at the Celtic cross, and you have the cross, and then you have the circle behind it. To me, that's St. Patrick going, listen, I know you're sun worshippers, but let's stick my thing in front of it here. And look, we're still worshipping it. It's still there.
It went on for a long, long time. Right up to the Normans. I would say that transformation you're talking about happened more in the Norman times, that you see, or more in the Tudor times. The clearances of trees, the establishment of the modern farming landscape that we eventually see today. Because you still see in the 10th century laws for people, and somebody sent it to me, one of my academic friends sent it to me, and it was a law that specifically related to people living in chariots with animals that had no land. And I thought, wow, that's a good one. Are we talking about travellers, what became modern travellers, or are we talking about a kind of behavior pattern which was part of the law, the Tua, the tribes, the clans? Were we still, was that the kind of life that was still very available?
Well, you see, I think there's a massive misconception with the travelling people in this country. There's a lot of people who think that they were lost land during the famine and all that. I don't believe that for one second. I think they've been around for a very long time. And I genuinely think that they are the linkage to Gaelic culture that remains.
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts on it, because a bit of disclosure there. I'm a man of conflicts, which is actually a good thing. So I was reared a college kid like everybody else, but my granny was a tinsmith's daughter.
Okay.
Now, so she was a settled traveller.
Yes.
So and weirdly, she was a Welsh traveller.
Yes.
So, there was a big thing in our family to try and, to modernise and leave all that behind. But you can't really suppress this stuff. So part of my chariot stuff was rediscovering that traveller type thing. And even though she was Welsh, which makes her a gypsy rather than a Irish traveller, one of her names was Cash. So I'm kind of holding on to that. I think it was a great-great-grandmother, you know. And so Cash would be travellers from Wexford. And I think the travellers in Wales, or the gypsies in Wales, married into a lot of Irish. You know, so there was for whatever reason, a lot of Irish and Welsh, even the likes of Tyson Fury up there, they're from around that kind of area. And I watch them on the TV, and they use the traveller words I've seen them use are kind of a mixture of gypsy words and Irish traveller words, you know. So so going back to it, what I really think, and I noticed that even in me, who's 3/4 settled and quarter traveller, I kind of have this kind of love for that, you know, and it seems so exotic in some way, even though I'm not actually, I didn't experience that culture growing up.
Yes.
It's like an exotic thing which I'm fascinated by myself. And I think a lot of people share that fascination.
Yes.
But what I really think, and I'm looking in myself here, is it's your actual Celtic tribal person, because traveller culture is a surviving clan culture. It still operates as a clan culture.
Yes.
And we all, even 150 years ago, that was everybody's life.
Yes.
So we're really seeing an echo of our own lives.
Well, you see, I genuinely think that, and I think it needs to be studied more, because as far as I can see, the family clan structure still exists. Society has prevented them from living the life which they once did, which was constantly travelling, you know, from place to place or that. But I reckon if you went back to Gaelic times or that you would have seen large amounts of cattle and horses that were droved all around the province. And the likelihood was that they would have been followed by people who lived in tents or small kind of carriage type operations. And I really disagree with this kind of connotation that no, during the famine, these people lost their land and they started traveling.
Don't think so.
Well, if you can explain to me, and they have their own language, and it's a great pity that more of them don't practice it, how that language was developed between 1845, it wasn't. No. That is an ancient dialect.
There's a lot of words which, I think there was someone in South Connemara who I think what their name was Amuraku, who created a dictionary of cant of Irish traveller talk. You know? And him being a Gaelic speaker, you know, found that a lot of the words, you know, the words, you know, it was, I don't know, I didn't research it, I didn't look at it, but the words are coming from all over the place.
Well, you see, it leads me to think, and you still see it going on today, certain trades develop their own dialect to keep the secret of the trade amongst themselves. So if you're speaking to, let's say you're speaking to a truck driver and he's somewhere on the continent, maybe something untoward is going on, you can have a full conversation without saying what is going on. And I would not doubt at all that cant was this subset of people's way of having their own conversations without other people around them being aware of what was going on.
So you only need a few words.
Yes.
You don't need all the words. You can use the local language and just throw in your different words for whatever it is. And I'm always aware, you know, I'd be afraid to say words because you're not supposed to say words. And if another traveller heard me saying words on you know, they'd be saying, why are you telling those words? You know?
Well, I never forgot it. We had American cousins, and they were home when I was very young. And a small bucket was called a conine. And we never called spuds, we called them praties. And my grandfather let us out. He says, bring your cousin with you and fill a conine of praties. He hadn't a notion what was asked, what we were about to do, anything. And it dawned on me, we were still talking English, but there was so much Irish thrown into it that, you know, I think it's really, really interesting. So I do.
It is. And I don't really know because it's lost to me. as well as everybody else.
Yeah.
And, so a lot of it is speculation, but it's clan culture again. And I would say that our clan culture was such a great clan culture that survived right longer than nearly any other clan culture. It survived right up to the age of gunpowder, and it was still going strong there with the great families, with the earls and the flight of the earls. And this is the kind of era that the flight of the earls comes from. And our clan culture, I think, including Brehon law, pretty much was going pretty strong up till then, because you had the Normans arrive, you had the Gaelic revival, and like you see de Burgo, the Lord of Connacht, riding in a Irish cattle raiding saddle, they'd been absorbed, more Irish than the Irish themselves, and everything was carrying on the way it always did carry on, and until Tudor times. And that was the time when, if you read the poet Reilly, who he's talking about the trees, how all the trees were destroyed, how there were all these forests with no leaves in them, no leaves on them, because all the forests had been ring-barked. They'd been, the forests were literally falling down because they were dead, because they'd been killed, to make this new landscape, and and it's about commercialism. It's about, I think, it was about shipbuilding. It was about iron smelting. The timber was wanted for all that, and it was about establishing different forms of farmland. And if you look at our time now, there are parallels. We've seen a loss of sovereignty, a loss of economic sovereignty, and immediately you see economic restructuring.
Yes.
You see new populations arriving.
Yes.
Because immediately we're not in control anymore. And so that almost happened straight away. And it happened almost straight away back in after the flight of the Earls. And it's happening almost straight away now. People just don't realize it. They don't want to accept it's happening. And nobody, this is the wonderful thing about these types of discussions, is we can talk about things that nobody else is talking about. You and me, we're not going, talk about immigration, you're a bad person. We're saying we have to. We have to.
Well, it's I suppose I take a step back from it, and I'm not only looking at the immigration, but I'm trying to figure out, well, what happened? What happened that now we have people who are so kind of cuckolded that they don't even want to acknowledge that it's happening? And I can't help but think that after the 2008 crash, that was such a fundamental kick in the teeth for the Irish people. From the 90s, you had this upward trajectory. All of a sudden, Irish people were doing well for themselves. We were being invested in. We were having our place at the table internationally. We were number one growth economy in the world. And then, bang.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, not only have you no money, you're in billions of debt.
Yeah.
You have these foreign bankers, the Troika, that come into the country, and I never forget that chopper fella walking across the homeless man on the street. Talk about an image.
Yeah. And
you have the begging bowl out. And there's one book in particular, anyone should read it. It's Hell at the Gates by Brian Lenihan, dead now, but he was the Minister for Finance at the time. And he basically says in black and white, we were days away from people going to an ATM and no money in it.
Yeah, that was a threat.
This was being talked about.
Yeah, and that was the threat that intimidate the. This is what I guess, because I read Yanis Varoufakis' book.
The Greek.
The Greek.
Brilliant.
I read
He's
the whole
brilliant.
book, and it was fascinating about the Eurogroup and all these people.
Well, but you see, it's a strange thing. It's one of those things as well. You remember characters like Eddie Hobbs. They were warning before this happened, and I remember them on RTE. I think it was 2005 or 2006 that Bertie Ahern was going well at the time. And the question was put to him, what about the economic situation if it cools off in America? How exposed are we or that? And he basically said, if you think like that, you should jump off a bridge. And he had to apologise for it.
Yeah.
But his kind of thing was, listen, things is going well, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
But are we not at the same stage now with immigration where you have certain voices who are going, listen, this mightn't work out the way you think, and you're told, listen, everything's going well, be quiet about it.
You can look back in history and see that too. You see these things happening. You can pick up on some of that stuff, especially the 9 Years' War.
Yeah.
And look, I think it takes people a while. I think Eddie Hobbs took a while to work out what was going on. I think he was talking about soft landings for a while,
He was, yeah. until it looked really hard.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at the 9 Years' War, and this is one of the things that bothers me is, when you look through history, you
just
see
when you say the 9 Years' War, just for anyone, because sometimes we'd make the presumption that people know what we're on about.
This was the war which preceded the Flight of the Earls. It was the war with the Elizabethans, which went spectacularly well for Hugh O'Neill.
Yes.
I mean, he did better than Braveheart for a long time, but and won more battles. I mean, they were just winning battle after battle against the English.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was going to go on forever. I mean, even the Battle of Kinsale was snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, it should never have happened. But if you look back through that period of time, I mean, this is one of the things which concerns me. Who do we blame? We never blame the right people. We always blame who it's convenient to blame.
Yes.
And we never blame ourselves.
Yeah.
And that means we never take responsibility for what's happened. And I see that.
Yes.
I see that in this, that we're particularly us Irish, it's the English, it's the Brits, it's the IRA, it's the nuns. And next, it was all the LGBT's fault. Say in 2040, we'll look back and say, what went wrong? Oh, it was all the LGBTs. But the truth is, it wasn't.
No,
it was
it wasn't.
us. It was us conceding so much. And when you go back to the 9 Years' War, and that's what I wanted to talk about, and I won't take long, is essentially it was Ulster and half of Munster against Leinster, Connacht, and half of Munster. So where I live, and all down the western coast, Thomond, Clare and Limerick, Clanrickard, Galway, East Galway, right up through Mayo, the O'Malleys, they all fought in that cavalry charge which won the battle for the English. So they were under English command, and they were the people who charged on the Irish and won the Battle of Kinsale for the English. It's sickening.
Yes.
It's sickening. But we say, it was the Irish against the English.
No,
but
it wasn't.
See, this is where it gets, actually it was us against us.
Yes.
Now.
But this has such modern implications, because at the moment, and I do try to say it, there's a lot of people who are anti-immigration for the correct reasons, which is people trafficking is wrong, you shouldn't take advantage of people, you're not in an economic situation to have it. And then there's just people who are outright racist, I just don't like them. And if you ask them for a kind of an intellectual reason, they have none. Do you know? There is certain characters like that. But at the moment, I'm pointing it out to people. They're annoyed at the asylum seeker. They're annoyed at the foreigner. And I'm saying, well, hold on a second. Let's look at the politician and the man who facilitated this. That's who you should be annoyed at. Muhammad did not buy a hotel and put 500 of his friends in it. That's the point that I think so many people are wrong at. And you see, I see these people and being set up for one of two reasons. Europe is establishing an army at the moment for their defense against Russia and Iran and all these. Look across European society. It's not filled with soldiers. It's filled with kind of soft-spoken people who are very good at pressing a few buttons, but they won't pull a trigger. So you have to import people to do that. And then the other side of it is, if you have an economic crisis, they're a scapegoat. There's something that a politician can go, look over there. You know, it wasn't us. You know, it's these people. They came to take your cookies here. And I just think that's one of the things that the right doesn't do very well. The right doesn't go, listen, immigration, fair enough, you can have a necessity for immigration in small if you don't have certain work groups or that. But what you're getting at the moment is mass immigration, and there's politicians who are facilitating this, and there's people in your area who are facilitating this, and they're to blame. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Look, there is, you know, it's not a logical, you can't really apply logic. What I would say in this case, you can apply the principles of self-interest to this and come out with a better understanding of it. So, you know, I was born in Scotland. My parents emigrated to the UK.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were, you know, undermining the wages of the local English. If you go back far enough.
Yes.
We were also benefiting ourselves because all of a sudden we'd gone from rural Ireland in the 1880s over to the UK, and we had holidays. You know, the Wakes weeks, we could go to Blackpool.
Yeah.
You know, people, these cotton mills and the rest of them, they were not all bad. You know, you had this was where trade unionism started.
Yes.
And this is where you had some power all of a sudden. This is where Michael Davitt came back from Manchester with the whole idea of how to beat the landlords.
Yeah.
And so when I look at this, people would say, well, ye emigrated over. Yeah, we were looking after our self-interest. And now when you're back in Ireland, you don't want immigrants in. No, I don't. I'm looking after my self-interest.
Yes.
I'm Irish, nobody else is.
Yeah.
Us Irish have to look after ourselves because no one else will. And there doesn't have to be logic to this. There's a whole, I'm using the logic of love thy neighbour as thyself.
Yeah.
So you got to love yourself first, then your family, then your wife first, then your children, then your community, then your parish, and then after that you can care about everybody else. But I don't think we need to say, well, we're being morally just here, or we're being morally correct, or even logical. We don't have to be any of those things. We can just have our own self-interest in our own land.
I think, you know, it goes back to the old saying, a wise man learns from others' mistakes, a fool makes his own. Do you know? So we look at our immigration experience, and what I always say is, look at the initial establishment period. So take an area like London, New York, Boston, Chicago, the turmoil that happened in those areas when mass groups of Irish arrived. And, you know, this whole nonsense of assimilation. Like, I can point to London. You know, I was born in London. I was brought home when I was 14 months. My mother was Irish. My father was Irish. I was christened in Ireland. They brought me back to baptise me. London, you had areas like Kilburn, Cricklewood, that were wholesalely Irish, bought out by the Irish, rented to the Irish. Your pickup points for work were in those areas. If you got a cheque, you were told, go to that pub to cash your cheque. You didn't use an English establishment. You cashed your cheque in your pub, your designated pub. All of this went on. There was no assimilation.
No.
It was a society functioning as if it was still in Ireland, except it was over there.
Yeah. And
Now, we were of benefit in the line of the utilities business. A lot of the women worked in the banks. You know, we were of benefit to the state. But let's not forget, a significant amount of the people were working off the books entirely. They were not entities within the state. And we watched that. And then you go back to New York when Ellis Island and that was in it, and the 5 Points and Queens and Brooklyn, and the outright violence that occurred. You know, before the mafia was in America, the Irish were there.
That's right.
People forget that.
Yeah.
If you go back to organised crime, it was predominantly Irish, and then it moved from Irish to Jewish, and then with the onset of the Italians, the mafia established themselves. So you take a character like Lucky Luciano, the initial Italian who brought the families together on that. His hitmen were Irish. People forget that. If he needed a Jewish gangster taken out, he got on to someone like, I think it was Mad Dog Cole or that, to take him out. These are the bits that people don't want to listen to.
Yeah.
It's very nice to think, I have a point to make after that, it's very nice to think that Irish people went all over the world and they were fantastic and there was never any problems, and look at all the good we've done for places.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to think Irish people went all over the world and initially there was a lot of problems.
Yeah.
There was a lot of problems with local people. There was a lifestyle that, like, you can read any of the older books in England about when the navvies, who were predominantly Irish and Scottish, were making their way around the town. Fair enough, they built the canal. They also got pissed drunk, smashed things, hurt people.
And burnt villages down. I know where I was living in Reading there somewhere, and there was a story where the Irish burnt the village down. I thought, how the hell did that happen?
You see, but you see, this is the aspect no one wants to admit. Look, we'll end on that, and follow us. We'll go on to Patreon now, Spotify exclusive for the continuation of the show.
Put it there.
Cheers.